Hello, welcome back. My name's Grandmaster Daniel Gormally. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Hometown Chess Hero. Today I want to talk about the Four Nations Chess League. I believe that was set up in the mid-1990s by Mike Juran and Chris Dunworth. And the first locations were somewhere like, I think it was a Grand Hotel in Birmingham. I remember there was a car alarm actually. No, there was like hotel alarms were very loud. I have like recollections of the early period of that league. And I played there years ago. It was more like a social. Like people would just go there for a social. You go to the bar, you'd get smashed. The first year I played, I wasn't really drinking. One of the first years I played, I wasn't really drinking. I started with 7 out of 7. Since then, I haven't really done as well. I think I'd suffer more from rust than maybe, you know, I just feel like in tournaments I play better because I warm up. You get games warm up. For instance, you come in, you play 2 games. I understand there's some players who can come in and play at the same level, whatever, but I'm not one of those players. I feel like I need to warm up. Obviously I've been playing a reasonable amount of chess lately, so it shouldn't really be an excuse, but it seems to always be the case that I'm never quite hitting it at the 4NCL. I prefer the 4NCL to be played over like one long week, like they do in Spain or France. Nevertheless, I played the 4NCL for many, many years. I've had many situations where I complained about playing it. I don't really perform well in the 4NCL, so I'm going to quit the 4NCL. I hate all the travelling that's involved. I'm going to quit the travelling. Nevertheless, I always come back every year to annoy my teammates with all this talk about how I quit. So the idea is you get your team together, you play a lot of games over the course of the season. You play 11 games. Yeah, as I was saying before, I remember I had this memory that was loud alarms going off. I remember one year, I think a King's Head player had an epileptic fit outside because the alarm was so loud it triggered epilepsy. And in fact, I was told later that he'd never had an epileptic fit before. And he died a few years. So I think this guy was like in his 40s or maybe 50s. I think he had like a moustache. I can't remember his name, but he was quite a decent player. He had an epileptic fit for the first time outside a hotel in Birmingham. And then he died a few years later because obviously epilepsy is a very serious medical, or can be a very serious medical condition if you have things like grand mal seizures and stuff like that. It's connected to your brain, so therefore brain is a vital organ. So yeah, I'm always touching on these subjects, very serious subjects like death. But this particular 4NCL took place in Milton Keynes. So to get there, it took me about 5 hours, over 5 hours from where I live. So I got a lift to Alnwick Station, Alnmouth Station from Alnwick. Then the train down. The train was completely packed for the entire journey because there was a landslip near Darlington. So therefore they had to cancel some of the trains. So normally that train going down on a Friday wouldn't be too busy. I went down quite early. But this one was, so I couldn't really get up for the entire 4 hours. So I sat there, couldn't get any food, couldn't really go to the toilet. Great, get off at Birmingham, get a little bit of a break. Then go from Birmingham to Milton Keynes, from Milton Keynes, get a taxi, which cost about £10. And then you're at the venue, which is, so you stay at the hotel, which is, I believe it's, where is it in Milton Keynes? I can't actually remember it. Even though I was there it shows how bad my memory is. I can't remember the name of the hotel. Somebody will refresh my memory. But it's kind of like a rabbit warren of different kind of convention. It's like a convention centre. And there was other stuff going on. There's often like a Christian kind of thing going on at the same time. And that was the case again this time. Didn't think the breakfast was particularly great, if I'm honest. Didn't really like the breakfast. Didn't eat much of it. I'm just being honest here. It was okay. It was passable, but wasn't wonderful. You can also have meal in the restaurant now, and the meals there are quite nice. There's a bar area upstairs which is quite nice as well. And it's also quite nice sort of countryside around there. You're kind of out in the sticks a little bit, even though you're in Milton Keynes. You're quite a long way from the centre of Milton Keynes. So it's about a 20-minute walk, I think, to the nearest shops. Anyway, in round one we were playing against quite a good team, Manx Liberty, but they had quite a lot of players missing because they're currently clashed with the European Team Championships, which is currently taking place, I believe, in somewhere like Macedonia, maybe, or Montenegro. I think it might be Montenegro, but I'm not entirely sure about that. And so I played against a guy called Petro Bobras. I believe he's either from Hungary or Poland. I was on board one. I was expecting to play against Pariglas, who I played before. He's been over 2650 apparently. He's been as high as 2650, but has now plummeted to 2530. So what you're seeing, actually, everybody's ratings dropping. My opponent's rating is 2437. A few years ago, he was 2560. My rating's 2445. Go back a sufficient number of years, I was 2573, right? Everybody's rating is plummeting due to the rating deflation. Juniors coming on the system with much lower ratings than what they should be. And therefore, everybody's ratings plummeting. Played my opponent. He had quite a hard handshake before the game, I noticed, actually. He like, crushed my hand up. You know, but he seemed like a nice guy. And I could tell in the post-mortem, I was like, hang on a minute, this guy's 24-37. This ain't right. You know, he's much stronger than that. He played well in the game. I'll just show you how the game went. It wasn't a particularly fascinating game, but it had interesting moments. So I played this system online, and it's quite a good system. I remember Richard Pert telling me well, it's quite a tricky system, I would say. I mean, there's tricks here. For example, if black goes G6, you go knight F3, you take queen F3. Now, online, a lot of people react badly here. They go E6. So what's the natural way? You're obviously threatening mate in one, right? You can't take the knight because it's going to allow the mate. So black has to deal with that. I played Jubob years ago. He played the move F5 against me in lots of blitz games. And we had lots of duels, tough duels, back in the days when I was probably not far off Jubob before he accelerated about 500 points above me. You can also go knight F6. And you can go knight H6. Those are the more standard moves. But E6 here is slightly inaccurate because now knight B5 is a bit of an opening trap. And if you go D6, the clever idea is you go queen A3. So G6 is certainly playable, but after bishop C4, of course, black doesn't even have to go knight D4 in the first place. Can allow the capture on C6 as well, also possible. Now, Richard Pert told me once in a pub that Magnus Carlsen played this against Radjabov, and he was black, and he played the move knight F6, which he said was the most accurate move order. And the idea is, if you go E5 for white, black will respond with the move D5. You take on F6, you take on C4. This is quite a reasonable position for black, because you would gain the bishop pair in a relatively open position. So going back to position after knight F6, white would probably respond with knight F3 or knight E2. However, then black plays A6 and gets quite a good version of this whole system. He's ready to play B5. I think another line is to go A6, knight F3 and then B5 is also possible. And I always wondered how you're supposed to play against this. Maybe bishop E2 is actually credible here. You know, just allowing the black to win the bishop pair. But if you go here and then you take and go knight E2, then I believe knight F6 is slightly annoying, because if you take on D4, then E6 is quite a good move. So going back to this position, after the move knight D4, bishop C4, my opponent played E6, which And I was kind of like regretting this decision to play this opening as soon as you played e6, because I was like, why didn't I should have looked at I looked at this before the game, but I didn't really look at e6. Or I was regretting not looking at e6 because I knew that was like the old main line, right? And I should have sort of investigated it further. But I kind of followed the theory. I went knight e2, which is a standard move, and my opponent went knight f6, and I castled. Now black has to be careful here. If you go d5, there is a trap here. I think you take. I think there's something like this happens. And now white goes, I believe he goes queen h5 or something. And the idea is if you go here, I now go rook e1 because what do you do? I think maybe you can go, can you go knight e7 here? Let me just check what the engine is saying. Like knight e7, is that playable? It's not good. You take and then you go rook e1. Yeah, this is quite a well-known trap. And after queen h5, bishop e6, rook e1 is a problem. For black. So what black does here is quite clever. He actually plays move a6. So he's trying to improve that variation. So there was a game that I remember from years back, and I played against Simon Williams at Hastings. And it was a bit of a naughty game from my part because I remember I was staying in the same hotel, I believe, as Simon. And one night I came back, and it was the night before I was due to play Simon. I overheard him chatting to Richard Pert, because Richard Pert has one of these voices that kind of carries, right? And he was like, you know, I could hear his voice. I kind of crept up and I could overhear them discussing this variation. And Richard was saying, yeah, this is what you do against Gormally, this is how to beat Gormally, sort of thing, right? And so I actually prepped this up. And I prepped up a6 for Simon, and Simon very quickly went a4. And I don't think he really knew all the details of his position, because obviously he's sort of preparing it specifically for this game, right? And after d5, I think he tried the same kind of thing, and he blitzed all this out. And after rook e1, I went knight f4, and then Simon started to pause, because I think he realised that there's no queen b5 check, because normally in this position with the pawn on a7, pawn on a4, white could go, sorry, bishop b5 check here. It's a very important move, bishop b5 check. With a knight on f4, you go bishop b5 check, king e7, queen g5, right? You can't put the bishop in the way because the rook is pinning the bishop. So after bishop b5, you imagine with a pawn on a7, black will be in trouble because king e7, you have queen g5. But now there's a massive difference because now white doesn't have this bishop b5. So this whole variation doesn't work. So Simon, I think, was forced to do something like this. And I went here and I should have won the game. I should have won the game. But right at the moment where I kind of sort of relaxed too early and I blundered into a perpetual, which was really careless of me when I had a totally winning position. So I got to won very, very quickly because Simon blundered into this preparation, you know, into this bad preparation for white. So that was a game where I should have beaten Simon. I had a good score against Simon at that time. Should have improved on it. Didn't. Regretted that decision. Regretted that moment. But yeah, interesting backstory that I overheard their preparation. Which is a bit naughty of me. I probably shouldn't have. Probably should have told Simon, given it was a friend of mine, or he is a friend of mine, I should say. But anyway, so that's, yeah. So basically, black is now able to go d5. That's the whole point of that story. So after a6, I decided to play d3 against Mr. Borbaras. And we got this line. I've had this against John Cox, and he remembered the theory that I had against John Cox better. I think bishop g5 is maybe not the best. Maybe f4. Maybe that's what I did against John Cox. But to be honest with you, I'm not really convinced about this whole line now. And I just feel like, you know, black, if anything, is better here because of the bishop pair. long term, bishop pair is a massive advantage in chess. You know, you see the engine is already slightly favouring black due to that bishop pair. However, there are practical chances. The problem is if you play a move like knight g3, that might run into a move like h5. And that's a kind of annoying move, right? Actually, I think that's what I did against John Cox, and I went bishop g5, and I allowed h4, and then I dropped the knight back. Maybe that's what I did against Cox. Maybe not deliberately, but, you know, I wasn't really intending, you know, to invite h5, h4, but once I got this position, I realised maybe bishop g5 was the best. What is the engine saying here? Yeah, but none of these lines are favouring white, right? If anything, white is slightly worse in all lines. So this whole variation just seems a bit... you need an improvement. Maybe this whole knight c3, bishop b5 is no good. So he went d6. And b4 was played. Knight a4. Yeah, so b4 was a good move actually. That kind of annoyed me when he played b4, you know. So I was actually thinking he might do something like this. But I think that's a risky choice because you're opening up the position where your king is in the centre. I was intending to take here and then take here. And I thought after he takes, I just go here. I've got very good play for the pawn. I'm threatening queen h5, queen g4. There's also ideas like queen f3, threatening queen f7. And if he defends against that, I have like a knight d6, queen hitting b7. There's lots of different ideas for white. I wasn't too worried about that. But I thought that's maybe what he'd do. But he played a very good move, which was b4, which kind of knocks that knight out. And I think one of the reasons he said after the game was that in the Cox game, at some point Cox went e5 and I did like a bishop g5 and knight d5. But he said that with b4 thrown in, now that wouldn't be an option for white. Now, I had an important decision to make. I realised a knight on a4 would be out of the game, but on the other hand, the move knight b1 looked too slow to me. If I could play two moves in a row and go knight b1 to d2, then it's probably okay. However, knight b1, you're then going to have to spend an extra move playing knight d2. The computer doesn't like knight b1. It thinks my move was the best. So, actually, from this position on, I pretty much played all the best moves. Or some of the best moves, but I still ended up in quite a critically bad position. So I played knight a4, and my opponent took on f5. Again, not quite a good decision, I think. I probably should have just taken out the rook for simplicity's sakes. And he was intending something like knight d7, which is quite a good choice. And black has a very solid position, very good position. But on the other hand, you know, white is nothing to really fear just yet. You take and then you maybe put the knight on g3 or something. Or maybe the knight could go to f4 as another option. So you could get a line like bishop takes e7, queen e7, knight f4, g6, knight d5. What happens there? Then queen d8 maybe? And if the rook drops back, then we take on d5 and the pawn on d5 might be weak. Yeah, I think this is a situation that black wants, is where he's going to try and play against that knight on a4 and just say that knight on a4 is out of the game. If the knight on a4 was on c4, white would not be worse, white would probably be slightly better. But the knight on a4 is really out of the game. On the other hand, black would always have to use a piece. If there was a pawn on a7, then you could keep the pawn on a7 and effectively you'd be like a piece up, right? But the fact that there's like a pawn on a6, black always, you know, you're not really a piece down. You're not really playing a piece down because black always has to keep a piece on that b6 square to guard against the knight jumping back into the game, right? Once it jumps back into b6, it's got easy access to d5 and c4, which are quite good squares. So yeah, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, but I didn't take on f5 with a rook. I went knight g3, which as soon as I played knight g3, I kind of regretted it, but actually it's not that bad a move. And the reason I regretted it is I thought, oh, hang on a minute, do I really get enough compensation if he takes knight f5 castles? But I think he judged his situation better than I did. And he was worried about the move knight b6, and the computer says that knight b6 gives black. I did see knight b6 with the idea queen b6, knight e7, and rook f6, and white is doing very well indeed. Just winning the game actually. Queen's coming to h5. It's kind of line that you're looking for when you play this variation. Very tactical line, right? But I thought if he plays a move like rook b8, I didn't really see where I was going. I thought I'm just 2 pawns down here. But, you know, objectively speaking, this knight on f5 is an excellent piece. And apparently I can play a move like knight f5 is actually quite good here. And I'm doing pretty well. In fact, the computer says instead of rook b8, rook a7 is better. And yeah, the position's about equal. However, none of this happened because my opponent played an excellent move, an excellent practical move, which really, you know, kind of put me under pressure, which was the move h6. And as soon as he played that, I was like, oh yeah, that's a good move, because I realised he wants me to exchange the bishop. That actually relieves all the pressure for him. That's kind of what I agreed to do in the end. I think maybe like a Tao in the late 1950s would have played bishop d2. And when you take, you go knight f5. But I really, you know, was doubtful, given that I was, you know, not sure about the compensation with the bishop on g5. I was really kind of doubtful about whether this would really offer me enough. And I thought, you know, you could just be 2 pawns down. And I don't really care like looking like an idiot. You know, I think in the past I would have said, oh, there's always a danger you look like an idiot if, you know, your teammates are watching you and you're just 2 pawns down. I don't really care about that, really. Yeah, I thought there's just a danger that I'm just in a lot of trouble here. So I didn't sequence to this variation. I think if I had this position again, I would have gone for this, because I think from a practical perspective, this gives white quite good chances, and objectively speaking, in the game, black was better as well. Or at least slightly better. But this is, yeah, not bad. I don't know how would the game continue after that. I'm interested to see what the computer says. So let's say, for example, it castled. Then you go knight b6 and you're getting tremendous play, apparently. There's even variations like, well, it is saying that black is better. For example, rook a7, queen e1, king h7. It gets very complex though, right? You've got to find all these kind of intricate moves from both sides. Yeah, I just felt like it just wasn't enough. I just felt like white was worse. So actually I made the right assessment to some degree, because the computer agrees with me. So instead of that, I took on f6. But of course, that's a move that is an admission that you got absolutely nothing at all. That you had not got a good position, or certainly not got an advantage. And now I'm just, you know, trying to limit the damage. But I felt from a team perspective point of view, I generally haven't played for the team in the past, but I felt like, you know, I don't want to do anything stupid on board 1 in the first game. I started the league last year. I believe I started with 0-2 actually. Or it started very badly. And it carried on from there. I didn't win a game until the final weekend. So I was conscious of that. And my opponent went g6. which is again a good move. And originally I intended here with the idea if he takes, I take. Well, hang on a minute, I'm coming through to f7, right? What are you going to do about that? Unfortunately, he goes bishop d4 check. So I checked that variation and I realised well, it doesn't work. If the king was on h1 and queen f3 would be a good move here, but it isn't. So therefore bishop d4 would just win the game. And then black would have the opportunity to defend f7, probably by castling. So I played, which is pretty much the only move here, which is knight e3. Knight e3 is better than knight g3. Knight g3, the knight is very bad. So black's advantages with the bishop pair would already be quite overwhelming. Probably just castle here. There's also moves like bishop e5 are quite reasonable as well. Bishop e5 would be a good move here. I think that would probably just castle. And yeah, moves like bishop d4 followed by queen g5 are coming. Bishop e5 followed by queen g5. The rook will get activated to e8 eventually. Black will probably push f5. Also ideas like h5, h4, kicking the knight away and then opening up the king's side with levers like f5 or d5 is also coming into the equation. You know, black has got all the play here. White has got nothing. You know, knight on g3 is dead. Whereas knight on e3, it's got a future. It can come to d5 and maybe exchange itself off for the bishop on b7, for example, as one option. It can also come to g4. I realised I was walking into bishop d4, but I thought if he goes bishop d4, I'll just go queen d2. I can defend any further attack with like rook e1. You know, so I was looking at, I thought actually bishop d4 was quite a good move. And I was looking at this, and if he goes f5, I don't think it favours him. I think I can possibly take. Or actually, no, I think I was intending c3. Yeah, I was intending c3, which is a good move. And I thought I was doing quite well, because if he takes, I'll probably take with a rook here. And I'm threatening to take now. So I don't think he should go in for this. I mean, he could gamble and maybe do something like this, but the computer doesn't like it at all. Well, I can take on b4, for example. Yeah, so probably you should castle kingside, actually. That's a more sensible move here. He's still actually doing reasonably well, you know. It was another way to play if he wanted an active, more active game. You know, if you're the kind of player, I mean, I might have been tempted by this as black. Because it's very straightforward. You're playing very aggressively. You're trying to get at a white king, right? I like this kind of play. I like, you know, oh, I like this. But this didn't happen. He played a very sensible move. He just castled. He's really killing my play. He's making it very difficult for me to generate anything at all. I felt his power. I felt his strength in this game. I went queen g4. I was expecting him to play queen g5 here. I don't think that's the most accurate move. I think what he did was correct. So I thought he'd go queen g5 and go for some kind of endgame. Now, why wasn't that a good option? Well, yeah, I was actually intending to do this, but I felt like this was still quite promising for black in the long run. But there's moves like e5 breaking control of c5. Make it less clear. So I think, again, he made the right choice. He went bishop c8, I went queen here. And I think I played a good move here, a good practical move, which was knight f5. You know, when you're feeling the element of the game going, the tide of the game going against you, it's a good idea to try and play actively, I think. Try and mix it up. And that was really my reasoning behind knight f5. I realised there was a possibility it might not work. Maybe he could take on f5, but I felt like if I don't do anything, he's just going to very quickly go queen g5, bring the rook to e8. It's not the end of the world, but it could turn into a very unpleasant position eventually. If I don't generate any play. And the problem is I can't really ever move this knight. Because A, for example, the queen is defending that square. And secondly, yeah, I mean, let's say the queen was to move to g5 later on. If I was to go knight b6, if the rook is already on e8, b2 is going to hang, right? Or the rook or something. No, well, I suppose a6 would be hanging. But yeah, just okay. Let's just see what happened then if I hadn't gone knight f5. Let's say I played a normal move like rook e1. What is engine saying? It's saying h5 is a good move. Yeah, interesting. I didn't consider that. So let's say I went here. And then it just thinks take and rook a7. Maybe ready for f5 eventually. Or the bishop will go to e5. And black can improve, like king g7, queen g5, h4, f5. Always looking for ways to improve, right? Or you go rook e7 to e6. You control f6. Computer always likes to improve the game. Yeah, very interesting, right? I could have played this actually. I'm not sure this is any worse than what I did. I went knight f5. Let's just turn the engine off temporarily. Yeah, and I thought if he went here, I think my intention was to go queen f4, which the computer says is one of the best moves and should be enough for a draw. Not winning. But the idea is you go, you're threatening queen h6, right? So I calculated this variation. And I calculated rook e8, queen h6, rook e5. And I wasn't sure about this because I thought if I go here intending, well, actually I'm not intending rook h4 anyway because he's got queen f6. Maybe I'm intending the slow roll, rook f1, followed by rook h4, right? Although here he's also got queen f8, but I think he can just go bishop f5. So I calculate this. I thought, oh, bishop f5 is big trouble, right? Because bishop g6. But after rook e5, he pointed out in a post-mortem I can go knight b6, which apparently the computer thinks is good enough for a draw. Because I think you take, and after rook f3, yeah, this is where it gets a bit weird. So you go rook f3, right, and you're intending rook g3, obviously, right? So knight b6, typical move to kind of distract the queen from f6. You go rook f3. Okay, so now I'm clearly threatening rook g3 check with forced checkmate, right? Bishop takes f6. I think you would just take on f6, probably with a queen. And you're still threatening nasty stuff with rook g3, followed by an attack. However, black has the move bishop f5 here. Is that the end of the story? No, it isn't. Because white carries on. Now it's different. Rook g3. Rook takes g6. And apparently this is some kind of weird draw. Now with the queen on da, I don't think it is a draw. I think black is winning. But after this, I need to check the engine here because I'm not quite entirely sure why this is a draw. Yeah, so let's say I went here and I went check. Ah, right. Yeah, you just end up with king is just too exposed to win the game. It's very marginal. But I think with a queen on d8, I think for some reason that whole variation would not work for white. Probably because the queen's a little bit closer to the action. You can block sometimes with a queen. So anyway, so very interesting variations, but he did not, you know, he trusted me, or more, well, he didn't trust me. He was like, trusted his own instincts that taking, allowing f6 and bishop h8 was not a good idea. So he went queen f6, which was a good practical move. Again, I think he was playing team chess as well. He was quite happy to make a draw. And I went rook e1 because I felt that was slightly improving the rook before I take the bishop. I wasn't afraid of this because I felt like this was, after rook d8, knight d5 is very good for white. Moves like this are bad news. This kind of thing can happen, and disaster, total disaster for black. So he can't really save the bishop very easily. So he decided to carry on with the same strategy. And yeah, originally here I was intending here, which is not a bad move actually, but I think I started becoming worried about variations like this. And I was a little bit afraid that after g3, there's a detail I missed here, I think, in my analysis, or I overlooked. I thought you could go bishop d4 actually, but then you go c3. Yeah, so I think I could also do this, but what I did was kind of similar. I went here. Now he took and offered me a draw, which I was surprised at, right? Yeah, and I pretty much quickly agreed to the draw because I realised I was worse. And the computer says that it's kind of borderline. It's almost close to a black win. It's like plus 1.1. Although I think if you to a really high depth, it would probably eventually say that although white is worse, probably holding. Objectively speaking, after a lot of moves, but it's an unpleasant ending. Good night there, marooned. The bishop is a good bishop. Somebody said later, that a bad bishop is better than a good knight or something like this. There's some famous saying, I've never heard of it, but apparently. So I accepted a draw. When he took on f3, he offered a draw. I accepted a draw at this point. You can take back the pawn. I think I would have just taken back the rook. And if black wants to hold, he could just go rook f8. But yeah, I accepted the draw. Quite a generous draw from my opponent. But I think he's playing team strategy. Draw on board one with black. They did end up winning the match fairly comfortably. But after rook f3, it's just going to pose you a question. And I'll try and answer this in the next video. What is black's best move after rook takes f3? Because it's quite a tricky puzzle, this. If I'd have played on and if I'd have had some balls and played on with rook takes f3, what is black's best move? Quite a tricky puzzle. Anyway, we're going to move on to the next game. So this is like a two-part video. So this is the first video which I'll just show you my games. The second part of the video, I'm going to look at other people's games in that league on that weekend, because there were some other interesting moments. I'll flip the board, just show you from my perspective. I was playing against a guy rated 2285 FIDE called Emil Powerski. No, that's probably a very bad pronunciation. There was a this was played at 11 AM on Sunday. I had a horrific journey back after this game, by the way. I'll talk about it a little bit later. But on the Sunday morning, had some breakfast. Then I went back to the room, watched a little bit of the golf, and then went, did a little bit of prep, not much prep, for the C3 Sicilian, which he played. I went for the game. When I walked in the room, everyone was quiet. So I assumed the games had started. So I couldn't remember how to write, even though I had prepared for this game, I couldn't remember how to spell the guy's name. So I took his score sheet just to write his name down. And also then I tried to start the clocks, and he was like, no. I was like, oh, then it suddenly occurred to me, oh, there's like a minute silence, right? And then it stopped, and we got on with the game. So that was kind of embarrassing. Although, to be honest, I know not everyone would agree with this. I do. So I think the minute silence, it was actually 2 minutes silence for the people who died in the wars. The whole remembrance thing. Although, like I say, not everybody will agree with this. I do think that I think we're too obsessed with death in this country. There's too many of these like minute silences before chess games. Obviously, it's different, you know. It's like the Remembrance Sunday sort of thing. But even so, I mean, people die, right? I think we're too obsessed with death. Let's just move on. You know, great. You know, they had their lives, great, wonderful. But let's just move on. I think there's too much like looking back. We're all gonna die. You know, like every time somebody dies, it's like pages and pages. This actor died the other day, Matthew Perry. Very sad. Died drowned in his swimming pool, jacuzzi. Very, very sad. There's pages and pages and pages. We're all going to die. You know, let's not obsess about it. Let's not keep looking back. That is my argument. I don't agree with all these minute silences they always have at these chess events. I think you just get on with the chess. You know, I don't want to be waiting around, remembering somebody I've never heard of. No disrespect to them. You know, and I'm sure when I die, which I will do one day, you know, people won't want to, like, have a minute's silence for me either. I wouldn't want to have a minute's silence for me. I have a minute's party for me. Anyway, let's have a look at this game. It wasn't a very interesting game, or particularly long game. But we're going to look at it. And I had some vague memory that this was a game similar to a game, I was black in this game, similar to a game played between Vidit and Nakamura from the Isle of Man very recently, where Nakamura played with his knight on d7. I believe that maybe Vidit played like an early bishop d3 in this game. And then eventually developed bishop to f4. But I'm not exactly sure about the move order. Or is this some kind of theory? Bishop d3 was been played before, right? Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, so I think in those lines, white can go bishop d3, maybe go for queen e2, and then even try the castle queenside. However, bishop d3 was played. Now, I was thinking seriously about playing a move knight d5 here. I wasn't sure what my opponent's intention was after knight d5. I thought maybe he wants to go bishop d3 and queen c2. And maybe hit h7. So at the end I decided to take. I thought he would take out the queen. I thought that was his idea, and I was going to castle. And I thought black's doing okay. I'm going to hit him with tempo with knight c6. But instead he took out a knight, which, yeah, was a good decision, I think. I castled. And he went bishop d3. Yeah, I think maybe that wasn't the most accurate. Maybe he should have gone bishop e2. I was actually expecting bishop e2 here. I thought that was quite a good move. And just because sometimes the bishop can go to f3. Whereas I think the bishop on d3... it's not necessarily helping him in an attacking sense, or not yet, because the knight on f6 is doing a good job of defending h7. So queen f3 he played. I wasn't really surprised about queen f3. I thought I was kind of expecting that, actually. But I felt like I reacted the right way. I went knight c5, he went back. Yeah, so this is another critical moment. I could have maybe kept the queens on, but I wasn't sure how to do it. I thought queen d5, actually, the move I played in the game, was fairly reasonable. If I want to keep the queens on, you can consider moves like knight d5. But I felt like if I do keep the queens on, then I think he has got quite a promising attack. If he can maybe even just castle queenside, it's obviously very risky for him as well to castle queenside, because his king is not exactly safe over there. There's ways that black can counter-attack, maybe with moves like b5 later on in the game. Obviously b5 at the moment would drop the rook. But yeah, I mean, moves like bishop d7 are possible, but I just didn't really feel that they really benefited me. So in the end I decided to go queen d5. I was wondering if he spent a while here. He spent quite a long time on a lot of his decisions, whether he considered queen e2, but I don't think that was a great choice. So the idea is maybe to go for some speculative hack, and if I take on g2, he castles. However, there is the move e5 here, and I did strongly consider, you know, or if he'd gone queen e2, whether I would have had the option of going e5, because I thought if I go I could take on g2 and allow him to open the g file. He castles queenside. Does he have enough comp there? I wasn't sure. I wasn't convinced. Thought my position is very solid. You know, if you look at the black pawn structure on the king side, very solid. Pawn on e6, pawn f7. It's going to be very hard for him to checkmate me. There's no weaknesses there. So I didn't really believe that move. So in the end he decided to take. But of course this doesn't really give white any advantage at all. I thought about bishop d7, but in the end I decided to play b6. I was expecting him to go knight c6 actually, hit the bishop. And then I was probably going to go bishop f6. I could also go here and just allow the exchange. I thought this is also quite good for black. Or not worse for black. Because if he castles, I can consider bishop a6, forcing him to play b3 or bishop b3. Or even bishop e4 was another decent option, where black is not worse. I think take with the knight. That is something I was considering in the game. Wasn't sure. I was probably going to go bishop f6 just to try and keep as many pieces on the board as possible. But he went a4. He spent a long time and he went a4, which when he played it, I thought that's a really good move. Now I went bishop a6. He went knight b5. I brought the rook to c8, which was a good decision, I think. I was playing all the right moves at this point in the game. And he went into d6. I went rook d8. He went knight e4. And I went bishop b7. And he went f3. So f3 I wasn't expecting. I didn't see the move f3. It was quite a good move, I think. And this is where I made a slight mistake. And initially I wasn't intending to play the move that I played. I didn't even consider that move when I first looked at this position. My first gut instinct was moves like knight f6. Was a move like a6. a6 is the best move actually. Hit the knight. I didn't realise that during the game. If I realised the knight a6 was the best move, I would have played it, right? But I, didn't have access to Stockfish. Obviously, I wasn't going to run to the toilet to check it on my phone, because that would be breaking the rules of chess and effectively throwing away your chess career. So I had no idea that a6 is the best move. But when I looked at it later, I was like, well, yeah, a6 does look instinctively like a good move, right? It feels like a good move because that knight on b5 is kind of annoying. It's a good idea to kick it away. I thought after a6, knight d4, I didn't really see anything that great though. I did calculate this variation. I was looking at moves like g6, e5. It's also maybe an option here because maybe the knight will get driven away with tempo. Although he could maybe do the same sequence he played in the game. Probably you would just go g6, right? I mean, we could check this in a minute. But, yeah, I think a6 was a good move. But instead I went e5. This is really a bad move. And I was using candidate moves theory. So I was like, okay, I don't know what to play. I don't know what the best move is. Let's think about my candidate moves. Oh, e5 is a candidate move. Why is that a good candidate move? Well, because knight can jump to e6 to f4. I'm keeping all the tension in the position. However, when you consider your moves, you've always got to consider